Hi, this is Richard. I have the privilege of talking about Katharine Drexel. St. Katharine Drexel is an amazing woman. She's the patron saint of racial justice and philanthropists because she gave away so much of her own money. She was born to a very, very rich family. Her father was pretty much the founder of modern international banking. Her mother died when Katharine was only 5 weeks old. Her father remarried a couple of years later to a woman named Eva Bouvier. Both of them were amazingly generous people. The Drexels believed that the reason that they were blessed with money was to be able to do good for others. And they were an incredible example of generosity. So Katharine and her three sisters grew up watching her parents give money away and to meet the needs of the poor. Her father gave hundreds of thousands of dollars to hospitals and orphanages and religious orders. And remember, this was in the 1800s, so hundreds of thousands of dollars at that time was a lot of money. Her mother, Emma, opened up their home a couple of times a week to allow people to come and get food and clothing and money for rent if they needed it. She even hired people to go out and find people who wouldn't come to their house so that she could help meet their needs. They were an incredible, just wonderful example of generosity. They had a chapel in their home, and Katharine and her sisters watched her father every day come home from work, and in the evening before he started the evening activities at home, would pray for half an hour. So he was also a very good example of holiness. Her stepmother, Emma, died in January of 1883 after suffering for 3 years with breast cancer. And her father, because of his grief, he was just heartbroken over it, took the girls on a trip, and they traveled extensively in the south and in the west of the U.S., where Katharine was able to see the plight firsthand of Native American Indians all over the western part of the U.S. and African Americans in the South. Her father died about 2 years later. He left $15 million in his estate. 10% went to charities, and the charities that he had supported his whole life, and the rest of it went to his daughters. Now, to put this in perspective, $15 million in 1885 when her father died is worth about $434 million today. He gave 10% of it to charities. He left $13.5 million in a trust for his daughters. And they were given from this trust $1,000 a day. So let's put this in today's perspectives. That meant that their $13.5 million was actually worth something closer to $400 million, $391 million actually. And their $1,000 a day is nearly $30,000 today. Now, you can't live on that, but it's a really good start. But the sisters had this an amazing amount of money, but they were grief-stricken over the loss of their father. So they went to Europe and went on a trip and were trying to just grieve over their father. And while they were in Europe, they were able to have an audience with Pope Leo XIII. And Katharine asked the Pope to send missionaries to the Native Americans because she was so concerned about the way that they were being treated. And the Pope said this to her: "It's true that there is a need for missionaries. What about you?" And it affected her life in such a drastic way that she shortly thereafter, joined the Sisters of Mercy in Philadelphia, where she was from. And shortly after that, founded her own religious order. It was the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, because Katharine's love for the Blessed Sacrament was so great. And it was actually her love for the Blessed Sacrament that allowed her to understand that everybody is called to the table of the Lord, that everybody should be treated with dignity. She worked tirelessly and spent her fortune building schools and missions. Her fortune was actually, at the time that she started her order, was worth about $7 million, which today would be about $202 million. She built 145 missions, 50 schools, and 12 schools on Indian reservations, because she was very concerned about the way that Native Americans were being treated and the way that African Americans were being treated in the United States. She founded a university in New Orleans that it's very popular today. It's called Xavier University. And she was a leader in racial justice 70 years before racial justice was even a thing in the United States. She spent the last 20 years of her life pretty much at her mother house in Philadelphia, because she had had a couple of heart attacks and was in pretty poor health. And her sisters were constantly busy serving Native Americans and African Americans, and they were, trying to make sure that the government was taking good care of them. So they were actually starting a groundswell of political activism. And during this time, it was really unpopular to do these kinds of things. And the Ku Klux Klan was brutal at that time. Her sisters were out doing marches and, being political activists. And her sisters came to her after they had participated in a march where the KKK was present, and they were calling them horrible names and cursing and spitting on them. And they were telling Mother Drexel about this experience. And what she said to them was, "Did you pray for them?" Katharine Drexel loved everyone and thought everyone should have the ability to come to the Lord because of her great love for the Eucharist, giving not just her money, but her very self in service to others. This could be you.